Well, hi guys, welcome back to the Flower Files. Today we're going to talk about something that I wish someone had explained to me a little sooner in my gardening career than when I learned the hard way about mint and lemon balm and a couple other things. I feel like when it comes to gardening, most people feel like they fall into two categories. They're either gardeners, and we're talking peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, how is your harvest of those things, and maybe some fruit trees and things like that, for the more adventurous and brave kind. I feel like blueberries are kind of safe, strawberries are safe, but when you start getting into fruit trees, that's when people get a little like, ooh, I don't know about that. So you have like your true gardeners, and you have your flower gardeners. And while they do blend, I think people tend to put things in very specific buckets when they're talking about the garden. And it's okay to blend those things. It's okay for them to all go together. But if you talk to somebody and they're like, I'm a gardener, and it's like, what do you grow? Understanding what you grow and how you grow, but most importantly, why you grow it, is all part of the question. So today we're going to dig deeper into here's some edible flowers you can grow, because honestly that's where most advice stops, and it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. Today we're going to talk about how to design an edible flower garden based on function, output, and end use. And maybe not in that order when you think about the most important parts, but we're going to dig into that, because edible flowers, a lot of the times people view them as just this pretty extra. They think it's this neat thing, and I'm just going to tuck a couple on my cake. But they are actually ingredients. They are inventory. They can be brand builders, and in some cases, they can be high margin profits, but only if you know how to grow them with intention. So today, we're going to break it down for you guys so you can understand how to grow some edible flowers in your garden, even if you are a tomato gardener. So let's start off talking about edible flowers, because not all flowers are interchangeable. I want to start there because this is where most people maybe get a little confused. People treat edible flowers like they're all in the same category, and realistically, they're not. Each edible flower, it actually behaves differently depending on what you're going to do with it. So you may have a flavor strength, you may have a different water content level, you may have a different vase life and shelf life. Some flowers dry amazingly, and they withhold their color and they withhold their flavor, and other flowers fall apart and are a hot mess. Some have very specific harvest windows, and if you want to harvest them for culinary, you need to make sure you're watching those windows a little bit differently, and the yield per plant is going to differ as well. And if you don't understand all of these pieces, then you end up growing things that literally don't support your goal. So I'd love to kind of break down an example for you, a couple examples here. I'm going to do this backwards. Normally you get all of the information and then you get the good stuff at the end. I'm going to give you good stuff kind of throughout in this one. Well, it's all good stuff, but so let's talk about calendula. Calendula is also known as pot marigold, and it is a flower that is commonly used in a myriad of things. It is completely culinary use. It's also used in lotions and a lot of skincare products. It's also used in some teas. It's known for having a little bit more of a mild flavor. It's very petally, so it breaks apart really, really nicely. It's excellent for drying. It holds its color really well. It holds its flavor really well. It stands up to using it fresh. So if you want to use those petals in something specific, fantastic. But if you want to dry it and keep it and use it for something specific, or add it to a tea or something else that you're doing, it holds up to all of those things. So One of the other things I personally really like about calendula as a flower from the garden that is culinary use as well as cut flower is the incredible yield. There is an incredible yield from these flowers over time. So flowers fall into three main categories. There's the once and dones, which are like a sunflower. You plant it once, you cut it once, you have the stem, and it's finished. Once and done. You have your cut and come again. These are the flowers that you cut and another one comes, and you cut that one and another one comes, and another and another and another until it's out of its season. Some of these are zinnias, cosmos, and calendula fall into this, and these are some of the most profitable and some of the most fantastic flowers that you can grow. That third category is kind of a little bit in between, where you maybe make a couple cuts so you have one main stem and then you get a couple other little stems that come out. Snapdragons are actually one of those for us, where you have a cut and you have some side shoots where you have another really good cutting from. So it's not constant, but it's not only once and done. So it falls in between. So your calendula is best for products like salts and teas and infusions, oils, that type of thing. So lots of versatility with this and really great color. It gives you that really bright color. Another one of my favorites, and I feel like most people can identify this flower, so I think this is why most people are comfortable saying, like, oh yeah, I know that that's an edible flower, is the viola or the pansy. They have a soft flavor. You know you're eating a flower. They're sweet. They are really visual. They have a beautiful visual impact in a myriad of colors. And they come in a variety of sizes. I mean, you can get a little tiny viola all the way up to a great big pansy with a lot of different colors all along the way. Bold colors, bright colors, muted colors, combination colors, sunrise, sunset colors, all kinds of things that you can do with them. They have a short shelf life of fresh time. You want to pick them and use them within a specific amount of time. They don't have as long of a shelf life as maybe some other flowers do, but they're phenomenal. There's so much that you can do with them. The only thing that I think makes them a little tricky sometimes is they may not dry as well without special care. If you don't dry these a specific way, they tend to curl, where your calendula, like we were just talking about, those petals are still identifiable as petals. But with violas and pansies, there are very specific steps that you have to take in order to make sure that they are dried correctly, that they're pressed correctly, that everything is all in alignment for them. They are great for garnish, they're great for baking, and they're great for direct to consumer sales. Again, I feel like most people can identify them. And the other part of this is they are another prolific flower. You plant a viola and you get a lot of those little heads right off the same plant. And they tend to reseed pretty hard. So they almost act like a perennial in the garden. So this would be one that I would definitely advise be careful where you plant it, because you're going to have them for many, many, many years. I do find there are some creatures that do like to eat them. Rabbits love them. Deer will eat them. So keep that in mind if you're like, oh yeah, I love that flower and I'm going to grow a whole bunch of them and it's going to be beautiful. Just make sure you're planting them in a place that you know that they're not going to get eaten, because we like to eat them, so do other things. Another flower that is fantastic for use, most people are familiar with and most people have seen, is nasturtium. Nasturtium is really well known for its orange flowers. They trail and they hang outside of a pot. They are fast growing. They have an incredibly high output, and the entire plant is usable. The leaf as well as the flower itself is really, they both have a great amount of flavor to them. This one is a little bit of a surprise though, if you're not aware. Nasturtium is actually spicy. So when you first bite into that plant or that leaf or that flower, they have a very strong, I'd say it's almost like a peppery flavor. So just to be aware that if you're going to use them, it's not going to be something sweet and cute like your pansy was. They're really good for salads because it's a beautiful color against the greens, but it also adds that spice, that little bit of snap in a salad that you may not be expecting. I'd say, when you have arugula in a salad, you can identify that it's arugula. Nasturtium kind of feels like that. Oh, there's nasturtium in there. Because they grow so well, they have a high turnover. Chefs are already familiar with them. You don't have to educate them on how to use it. But they're a fantastic, fantastic flower. I feel I would be remiss if I didn't mention lavender. Lavender is definitely well known for its culinary use. It has a long history of a variety of uses. Lavender is not only culinary based because you can go into Starbucks in the spring and you've got the lavender foam matcha, because I'm not addicted to that. But there's a lot of different uses for lavender, from personal use for skincare to lots of edible things. It has a strong flavor, so make sure you're using it carefully because it can be a little overpowering. You don't want to put too much in. It is excellent for drying. It is top notch for drying. It holds its color, holds its flavor, holds its scent. Super easy to use. And it has a really surprisingly long harvest window if you manage it well. So you could have a couple different varieties, but even within the plant itself, it has a longer harvest window. So lavender is awesome. So out of those couple that I've just explained, because I could spend literally hours explaining all of these different flowers that are spicy, that are sweet, that surprise you, that have a snap, that are different. But I don't think you're here for that. I think you're here for other information, because you have to know what your end use is. If you don't match the flower to the use, you end up creating waste. So I want to start with your end product. This is one of those times where you start with your end product and you work backwards. Don't start with the plant and be like, hey, I have this. Before you plant a single thing, before you buy a seed, you want to define your output. What are you going to, not your garden, your output. What are you going to do? Because your output is going to determine what you grow, how much you grow, when you harvest, and how you handle it post-harvest. So you want to define your lane. You want to pick one primary lane first. So let's talk about the different lanes. So are you looking at fresh use? This is immediate consumption. This is salads, garnishes, cakes, and drinks. That's basically where those categories fall into. This requires frequent harvesting, daily or every other day, short harvest to use windows, good refrigeration that isn't too cold to destroy the blooms, and consistent succession planning. You don't want to have, hey, I have everything, and then 3 weeks later you're completely out of it. You have to have a good succession plan for it to be able to continue to be able to be available for use. You don't want to train your chefs that, hey, I have this, and then they start buying things and all of a sudden be like, whoops, by the way. Now, there is seasonality to consider, and chefs are going to understand that. However, you want to extend that window for as long as possible, and that's where succession planning is really important for fresh. If you're looking at dried or shelf-stable products, that is totally different. Your processing, harvesting, and your entire model is going to be different. This is good for teas and salts and sugars and blends and things like that. You're going to dry it. You're going to also have, when it comes to things like this, anything that is a raw commodity, anything that you are picking, harvesting, and selling, it is just like a fruit or a vegetable in many places when it comes to the rules for how to be able to sell those things. It is a commodity. It's just like you plant the seed, you let it grow, you harvest, and then you can sell it. just like you would a tomato, a pepper, an eggplant, a strawberry, any of those things. Flowers are very similar to that. It's a commodity. However, as soon as you do anything to it to process it, dry it, anything like that, that changes. And you need to check the individual laws and regulations through your health department and depending on what you plan to do with it. Because having an idea and wanting to do something with it requires a lot of steps if you're looking at it to be a shelf-stable product. It is a completely different product that way. So these are things, as I said, like your teas, sugars, salts, and blends. These truly require you to make selections of things that are going to hold their color, hold their structure. You can do it in batches. You're going to want to do a batch harvest. You're going to need the drying space. You're going to have the correct setup for access to, use of, or your own commercial kitchen if you're going to be doing certain things. Again, if it's teas will have a different process than an end product like a salt or a sugar. So there is a lot of consideration before you jump into something along these lines. So just check those rules. If you have questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out. I will help you with the process because it took a village helping us understand the entire process, what we needed to do, and how it was done. I couldn't have done it on my own because there were so many parts to navigate through. It was incredible. So if you're looking to do direct sales, if you've got farmers markets or wholesale or something along those lines, industry standard tends to be clamshells. I know that that's not always the most environmentally friendly, but if you can find recyclable clamshells, again, that is industry standard, and that is done so that the plant material is protected after it's harvested. It can hold up well in a refrigerator. If you're thinking about a commercial kitchen and the chefs and everybody are in and out and in and out, in and out of there, that product needs to be safe. And those clamshells are pretty sturdy. So, plus they're see-through and people will know like, oh, that's where that is. If you have a bag or something like that, it totally changes things. Clamshells, chef packs, and then there's event florals. So think about your presentation and how you would like it to be presented. This requires a clean, uniform product. You want predictable harvest times. You want to have packaging and food safe handling methods. And most people try to do all three all at once. They try to have something that is, fresh that they want to sell, and then they try to do something that's dried that they want to sell for shelf stability, and then they want to have something where, well, we have all these flowers, now we're going to sell it direct to, and everybody tries to do it all at once. Think about your yield, your timing, your labor. I want to talk to you about the things that no one really talks about, because I want to talk about the reality of it. Because edible flowers are labor heavy and time sensitive, two things that cost money. Most edible flowers should be harvested early morning before heat stress and at a very specific stage. If you harvest them too early, they tend to be underdeveloped, and if you harvest them too late, they can be a little bitter. They can wilt much easier, and you're more likely to have brown edges. So you want to make sure you're harvesting right at the right time. You want to look at your yield as well. Not all flowers produce the same way. So as we already talked about, calendula and nasturtium are those cut and come again varieties. So you've got a continuous harvest over weeks and months, which is really nice. You've got some specialty blooms, which you've got large bursts and slower production, depending on the season and things like that. And then you have slow producers, which are some of your perennials and some woody plants. So when we're talking about perennials and woody plants, forsythia in the spring. Most people don't know that forsythia is actually an edible, and it is so incredibly spicy. Like, scrape it off your tongue the first time you try it, spicy. Stock is another flower, super spicy. Never would have thought. So know your plants, know your end use, and know how you're going to use them. And also know how they are sold in the industry standard-wise. Is it sold loose petals, just chunked? Is it sold by the stem and all of the flowers are still attached on the stem? Are they in a bunch of heads? Like, understand what it is you're going to sell. And if you have a lower yield, you're going to have higher value per stem. I've already talked about in a previous episode saffron, and that is like the cream of the crop of the edible flower. These are flowers that are a little more attainable for folks to be able to grow. If you don't understand the supply and the demand, you're going to overestimate the supply, you're going to underestimate your labor, and you're going to potentially misprice your product. And we've learned by making mistakes through this. We grew borage the first year, or borage, depends on who you talk to. Really, really had an excellent crop. Wasn't the right time of year for when people wanted it. We grew it really well. Another plant that we've done is scented geraniums. People love to use scented geraniums. There's a lot of lamb dishes that I feel like chefs will like cook with it, and they lay it underneath, and they have this whole process. It's not anything I would have ever thought of to be able to use that's edible, but it is. There's a list of perennials. Monarda, Agastache. The list goes on and on and on. So I need to stay on track, but the list of edible florals is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So you've grown your plants, you've started to harvest, and now you have to figure out what to do with it. This is when you have to step into that professional territory. Edible flowers are not handled like cut flowers. You cannot treat them like bouquets. You can't let them sit in the sun. You can't harvest and deal with it later. You need immediate cooling. You have to have access to immediate cooling. You're going to harvest and you're going to get them into that cool environment quickly to maintain that quality. Even 30 minutes of heat can reduce that shelf life dramatically. And it doesn't seem like it, but even 30 minutes matters. You want super clean handling too. You don't want pesticides. That goes without saying. But bugs happen. And what do? How do you deem that it's okay to be used? And there's a lot of certified safe for edible use florals. You want to make sure you have clean hands and clean containers because you don't want any type of cross-contamination. Your storage window for these guys, most fresh edible florals last 2 to 5 days. Let me say that again. 2 to 5 days maximum under refrigeration. So this is if everything is perfect. Everything is perfect. You've harvested at the perfect time. You've cooled it immediately. You have no extraneous, think about transportation in the middle. You've got to get it in from the field into the cooler, and then you have to get it to where it's going to go. So some flowers even have less time than that. So dahlias are edible, but dahlias are super sensitive, and those outer edge petals are some of the first ones to give folks a hard time. It's great if you're sticking it on a cake and you can get it to stay, and that's great. I get it, icing and all of those things. But what if you're not? What if you're using it for something else, or you have a different presentation? And honestly, even on a cake, you want it to be perfect. I'm joking, but they have a very specific window, and all of the flowers do. So your harvest schedule must match your sales and use. Okay, so we've talked about all of these pieces. Let's talk a little bit about pricing and value, because you put all the work in. You don't want to undersell things. And here's the honest truth. Most people underprice edible flowers because They compare them to vegetables, or they ignore the labor, or they ignore the loss. But edible flowers are a premium product. You're selling visual impact, specialty ingredients, and experience. You're not selling calories. So you need to think about it a little bit differently. Instead of a bunch, think clamshells, pinches, and garnish packs. And you want to price based on using those terms and understanding the lingo that goes back into that language. You want to price based on the time to harvest, the yield per plant, the shelf life risk. If it takes you 20 minutes to harvest a sellable quantity, that has to show up in your pricing. Okay, so if you've figured out all of these pieces, you need to build a focused edible floral system. So instead of planting everything, build a tight system. Choose your output. And I know it feels like common sense to, well, if I'm going to pick it fresh, whatever doesn't sell, I'm just going to turn it into dried. And then somewhere in there, I'll try to figure out sales. It gets to be overwhelming, and then things don't work and things sit. And you don't want to do that. So you want to choose 3 to 5 core crops. So, for example, depending on your product, you want to figure out what flower you want to use. So if you have a product-based system, calendula, lavender, chamomile, roses, marigold, those are all really good lavender. I think I said that. These are all really good flowers that are great for products. But if you want fresh and you want garnish, you're probably going to lean more towards violas, nasturtiums, borage. Like those are some things. In all of this, I know herbs kind of get interwoven. You've got your mints and your lemon balms and rosemary, and there's so much that goes hand in hand, and it all goes together. So you want to match your time and your space, because realistically, how often can I harvest? Do I have the drying space? Do I have buyers? And it's the chicken and the egg. Do you grow some and work with specific chefs and see what works and then tailor it to them moving forward? Or do you grow a bunch and try to find a wholesaler and try to move it that way? Or do you contract with growers and chefs together? Do you form a floral CSA? There's a huge variety. There's so many different things, and there's so many different types. When we first started to look, the lists of edible florals are incredible, and the suppliers of them have these long lists, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not growing enough. When you first start, pick 3 to 5 crops, do them well, find your market, establish your name. That's the important part. Don't try to do it all at once. Scale what works. You're going to grow, test, adjust, expand. Because you may love sweet pea, like the sweet pea shoots, not the poisonous one. Let's use a different example. You may love lavender. But what happens if you have thick, heavy clay soil and it's not going to grow well for you? Lavender won't be your best option. You need to look at growing something else that's going to do well for you. You want to be successful. Okay, your final reality check here. Edible flowers are one of the most profitable and waste-prone crops you could grow because they sit right on that line. You have to grow them so that they're ready, so that you can use them, but you don't want them to go too far. They sit right on that line. It's a real fine line. And the difference between success and frustration is this. Did you grow them with a plan, or did you just grow them because they were edible? Understand how you're going to use them and experiment. If you're like, this is my year and I'm going to figure this out, great. Play with it all day long. Figure it out. Do all of the work and understand how it fits together. You want to grow for teas? Figure out your recipes. Go backwards. I want to be a tea producer. What do I need to put in my teas? How well does it grow? Can I source it from somewhere else? Does it make sense? I want to grow oils. Okay, where am I getting the oil? What am I going to put in it? What actually grows? What does the market say? Do your research, learn, understand, talk to people, ask questions. It's okay. People like helping other people, especially when they have questions and there's new ideas. So before you plant another edible flower this season, pause, define its purpose, design your system, and then grow. Because when you do it right, edible flowers stop being just an aesthetic choice. It's not just something pretty that's pressed and tucked on a cookie or on a cake. It becomes something that's functional, valuable, part of your business, and part of your garden. And let's face it, flowers are fun. So here's to the honeysuckle that you eat as a kid, and maybe the wild raspberries that grow near it later in the season. But when you get a chance, take a look at our blog. We're getting ready to post our blog all about our edible florals, and pretty sure we're going to have a download and a freebie that goes with this coming up soon. So make sure you guys pay attention with that. As always, thank you for listening to the Flower Files.